welcome Phil to Home is Where the Dark Is. Man, thank you so much for dropping by. And it's been a minute since we've seen each other, and you've been here before. We did a little fun demo a while back, and we had lunch at the barbecue place down the street too. So yeah, but thanks for coming by. And
of course, it goes back a little longer than that.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it's great to see you again, man.
You too, man.
So to start off, like, how have things been going for you lately? I know you have a show coming up at the Roxy, and you had an album come out last year, The Last Resort.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about your current activities and your current events in the music industry.
Well, we had worked really hard for the last decade, really. Ever since we got 7Horse started, we kind of had it, the throttle was down full, and right through the pandemic, we wrote and recorded a record, and we started our own podcast, and we did some live streaming, and then that rolled right into the release of the record in 2022, and at the beginning of the year, I just felt like, man, I needed a breather. I needed to stop talking about myself, for a while on social media, just pushing stuff out. It's just after a while.
Don't you feel it can get a little bit toxic if you submerge yourself too deep into it? Did it feel like that for you?
Well, it started to feel really like a job, and sometimes when you need to take your foot off the accelerator, and you realize that you can't be creative every single day, day after day after day, for the rest of your life. You're going to have to live a little, recharge your batteries, do things that you just enjoy, to find the energy to continue to work.
Right, because we need to live life to have something to write about.
Exactly.
Right?
So I took a little, did take a trip to Italy at the beginning of 2022, which was really fun and inspiring. And Joey came over, my partner, Joey Callio. We hung out in Rome for a little bit, which was great. But at the beginning of the year, I decided to just, we had gone through the release cycle of the record. We've got all the tracks out. We'd made a ton of content. We were, working really hard on that. And so I decided to take it easy a little bit for a few months, just to kind of recharge the batteries. And then we got an offer to play at the Roxy. We'd done the show in 2022 there. I bought out the room and produced it myself, which is a pretty large undertaking, but it was pretty cool. We brought in, a whole video board, and we did a lot of production there. And but it's a pretty serious undertaking. This time we got an offer to come in with Golden Voice producing, and so we decided to do the show. And then in the course of I'm sure we'll get into it, but we decided to I always try to make my shows put as much value into the show as you possibly can, right? So Dada hadn't played, my other band hadn't played together since, we were on the road in 2017, and we did one live stream thing during the pandemic, but saw this as an opportunity to maybe reform that and get that on stage as well. So we've added Dada to the show.
Saw that.
And,
right on.
Which is really cool. Every time that band gets together, there's so much history there, and that has such a strong core fan base that I think people are pretty psyched that we're gonna be doing something.
Absolutely. And how do you feel about, since you've had 7Horse for about 10 years now? Is that about?
A little longer now,
okay.
Actually. It was the first record came out in 2011.
Okay. So when you go from like jamming 7Horse songs and having the fans for 7Horse, maybe a lot of them were Dada fans that
some of them
moved over, and when you go since you've been jamming on these 7Horse songs for so long, and then going back to those Dada tunes, like, what is that feeling like for you? Is it nostalgia? Is it like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember, because I'm sure every song you wrote during that time is like, it's a timestamp in your life. Or like, I remember what I was going through when I wrote that song. Or does it bring you back to those days? Or like, how does it feel to go back to those tunes?
It's interesting, because in 7Horse, it's very, It's much more about the present, my present state of mind. And you make a good point about revisiting older material. But in Dada, I think of myself first and foremost as a drummer, and I find when I've just been, I really hadn't played that much in the last 4 or 5 months. I've been playing golf, and so just taking a break. But I've gotten back on the drums now the last month or so just to start to get ready for this gig, and have been playing along with myself, from the old days, putting on Dada songs and revisiting some of that stuff to get refamiliarize myself with it. And it's strange that it's in there, muscle memory. It just never leaves. It's like, I feel like I could get up there and do it right now. So it's weird. It is nostalgic, and there is so much history there, but at the same time, it's very accessible to me. The things that I did on those songs. I hear the records and go, wow, listen to me when I was just a kid playing, and how maybe I would do it differently now or whatever. But
Sure.
But as far as presenting those things live, it didn't take very long for me to just recapture the approach. It's still part of my thing.
Sure. Sure you toured those songs with Dada for so many years. It's like almost impossible to lose that muscle memory and, the song structures. Like it's
Right.
permanently in there, right?
Yeah.
So,
I'm hoping that there's going to be some room for improvisation and a fresh approach to those things when you come back to them, years later. But it's pretty well ingrained. It's hard to get away from that stuff. It's in there.
yeah, when you look back on maybe some of the less popular Dada songs, or like any of this Dada songs, really, when you look back and you're re-listening to your discography, if you do that a lot or not, but what is what kind of advice can you give to younger musicians, or maybe musicians that are having kind of a maybe like a mid-career crisis? I don't know if you've experienced that, but when you listen back to some of your older stuff and you're like, because I know some people go, wow, what the fuck was I thinking? Or, wow, that was really good.
Yeah.
Or and everything in between. So have you experienced that with, some of the earlier Dada music? Or like, what can you say to people to like, just, because I know for me, it's like, just give yourself a break. It's a timestamp.
Right.
It's who you were then, not who you are
Well, it's
now.
interesting. I don't tend to listen to that stuff very much unless I'm in a situation where I am right now, where it's like, where I'm going to go play some of this music live. And so I want to get back into it. A lot of the time, like when I, listen to Puzzle, which is our first record that had Disneyland on it, I hear that and I go, yeah, that was that's a pretty good record. It still holds up. It sounds great. The performances, I get where I was coming from then. I was a much younger man. I was a much younger musician. My influences are right on my sleeve in those days. Stuart Copeland was such a big influence of mine, and Ringo. Those are my two big guys. And when I listen to myself on that record, I hear both of those influences quite a bit. But while I hear things that I would have liked to have done better or differently now, I think it's perfect for the time, and I wouldn't change that. As far as advice goes, the only thing that I can say is, you put everything you have into the thing that you're doing at that time and in the present moment. And then, as far as looking back on it later, there's always things you could do differently. But I agree with you. You kind of have to give yourself a break. It was then. That's all the information, all the knowledge you had is what you brought to that session. You gave it every ounce of emotion that you could when you played. And it's a picture of a time. And I think for me, I look back fondly at those times. It's especially now, the farther I get away from it, the more clearly I see who I was then and who we were and what we were trying to do. And I like those guys, those young kids. They were pretty cool.
Would you consider yourself, maybe more when it comes to music, but also generally in life, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Well, I think maybe, I suppose, we're always trying to get it right. Every record, that I've made, every track that I've cut, I've been striving to to make it as good as it can be, to achieve the vision that I have in my head, the thing that I'm hearing in my head before it ever goes down. You know, I'm hearing the record, what it should be like, and I'm trying to hit that. Along the way, you run into happy accidents that take you off in a different direction, and I think you want to be willing, you know, open enough to run into those opportunities and chase them down, and also to hear what everybody in the room has to say and what ideas come up. A lot of times you're locked in on your idea. I'm one of those kind of guys. I do think I'm right a lot of the time, and so I'll present my argument about why it should be this way, and I'll do it in a pretty forceful and confident way. But you also have to respect the people you're working with, and they all have great ideas too. And, you know, we're going to may the best idea win. And the only way you find out is by trying things and being open to somebody else's suggestion. And I think I am that way. I don't mind people suggesting that I try something a certain way, or that the band, whatever band I'm working with, go down a certain road. So I think it's a combination of both things. You know, yeah, you're striving for perfection. I don't think you're ever actually, I mean, what is that?
Right.
You know, I mean, I always hear things, looking back, there's always things that I go, you know, could have done that better. I hear every imperfection. So I'm more aware of the imperfections than I guess that makes me a perfectionist, but I'm willing to accept it. I'm willing to accept that you can't get it perfect.
Sure. And
that's what makes it great. You
right.
know, the imperfections. And that's what I think is missing a lot in music. I mean, you know, this is kind of an old song, but people complain about that in modern day music, that everything is too mechanized, quantized, pitch corrected, auto-tuned. I mean, and it's all true. We didn't have that back in the day. And there's the humanity of the music is a little bit more obvious, you know. I like that. That's the kind of music I grew up on. Sure.
And I think, you know, everyone has, I guess, a personal preference when it comes to music. And I feel like you said, what is perfect? When you're sitting there, you're writing the song, you're in the studio, and you're cutting it, and you're having the conversation with your band members, and maybe you have different opinion. But to me, music and songwriting is subjective. It's not what might be perfect to you. If someone else hears it a different way, that's perfect to them, whatever. But when you're in the studio with your producer and your fellow musicians in your band, I also think it's really important to work with people who, you know, challenge you, but you're also on the same page musically, aesthetically, so that your ideas aren't so different and so conflicting that it's like impossible to work with. Which it seems was what you have a great partner in 7Horse. You guys are on the same page, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Absolutely correct. Yeah. That has always been, you know, I've been fortunate with that from the beginning of Dada. Both those guys, Mike and Joey, we shared the vision of what, you know, we understood what we were trying to do without even talking about it very much. You know, that's when you really have got something with a band, when you don't sit around and have this, you know, write out a laundry list of here's our objectives and here are the things we're trying to do musically. We talked about influences a little bit very early when we met, and then we probably never talked about it again, because there are certain signposts, certain references that everybody has in their heads that you all are drawing from, and then it carried on into 7Horse. I mean, Joey and I definitely are coming from the same place as far as, I mean, we have individual tastes too. Certain things that he likes, I don't, vice versa. But overall, the sound of what we're trying to achieve, we haven't really had too many disputes about the direct. I mean, it's been kind of full steam ahead. You know, we agree more often than not.
I can see that. Often. Yeah, and I'm sure the things that you do maybe have minor conflicts about, or like kind of petty things like mixed stuff, like the, you know, stuff that, you know, most people listening wouldn't care about. Hear it. Yeah. But I mean, I totally get it, because, you know, as a songwriter, as a musician, myself as an engineer producer, like all these little details, we can find ourselves focusing on too much for too long. And then at some point you just got to have someone like snap you out of it and be like, it's great, let's move on, because you could nitpick and obsess forever, right?
Always do that stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the things that hang you up, like should the thing go, should the sustain on this particular note last to the end of the bar, or should it cut out just a little bit? You could have a 30-40 minute conversation about this, you know, and this is not something that counts. This doesn't matter. I mean, you're so dialed in to it is coming from a positive place, because it's usually about the emotional nuance of that thing. What does it make you feel like when that note sustains a little bit longer? Does it draw that tension out? Does it make you feel a little bit more sad before it resolves, or whatever it is, And these are the kind of conversations that you're having. And then when it's actually happening, when the listener is on it, they're not thinking about that at all. They're taking the whole thing, and they people listen to your music in a much more sort of macro way.
Oh yeah.
And when you make it, you're in this micro headspace, and it's hard though to get to that point where you go, oh, let's just move on. You're so focused on it, and you want it to be such a way because you're really feeling it. It's really about, I feel this emotion from this thing, and I'm trying to dial that into the exact right amount. And then, later people are listening to it and there's so much coming at them that there's no way they could focus on that little thing,
Right.
And that's just something that we forget about sometimes, that, which is why it's great to allow, it's good enough. Somebody has to say that. Usually it's the producer, it's like, hey guys, we're down the rabbit hole here. Let's keep moving.
Yeah. That's a big part of a producer role, to kind of, draw everyone in and be like, look guys, we've been obsessing over something that no one cares about for 3 hours.
Right.
This is what I think we should do. Let's agree on it, or let's figure it out and move on. But yeah. So you said before that, when you record these songs and you write these songs, and you've had all these different records in your career, and you go in very confident about your ideas, and you're, persistent about it. So I was wondering if you ever experience imposter syndrome, or if you ever have, because this is, I've asked quite a few people about this, because I know it's fairly common. And, there's certain artists, like big name artists, that they go into the studio and they cut something maybe in a take or two, and they're very, very self-conscious about it and insecure about it. But the engineer and the producer sitting there like with their jaw on the floor, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there's something in a lot of us that says we're not good enough, even if we've had like an amazing career, like every session, every show, whatever. Instead of seeing like all the good in it, you can see or feel like less than, or feel not good enough. I didn't know that's an issue that a lot of us deal with. So I'm curious if you've ever gone through that, or if you've been pretty confident in the majority of your career with your creativity.
Yeah. For a long time, I was very confident, probably overconfident. And then I got a certain amount of awareness about myself and about other people's talent and what other people are capable of. And then I became like, I don't actually know how to do anything. When it comes down to it, I really don't know what I'm doing. And that's kind of true. I've just figured it out as I've gone along. I mean, I came out, I had success early, and that tends to give you an overinflated sense of yourself, that you're pretty good. And then and what you usually, and it did in my case too, the whole thing fell apart. And that was, in the late 90s, and my whole life kind of fell apart. And I had to, by the time Dada lost its record deal in 98, we were signed to MCA and we got dropped, and I went bankrupt. I got a divorce. I lost my apartment. I was busted out, after having a hit record and getting to travel and doing all the things that we all are trying to accomplish, So when you get to that point, that low point, that really, it can do a couple of things to you. One, it gives you a real cold slap in the face about the realities of the business and that you're trying to be in, and that things, won't just be a constant. It's not just going to be this ramp up to, this one direction. It is a bit like this. And for me, it made me really take stock of what am I good at? Having said all that, I plowed forward anyway. I mean, faced with certain doubts and insecurities. I guess you have two choices. You can let that stop you from pursuing the things you want to do, or you can do it anyway. And even in the face, it doesn't mean you're going to not have those feelings. It just means you're going to do it anyway. And so I pretty much, in whatever I've attempted to do in my life, in show business and outside of the business, I've just done it anyway. And so now I think I have a pretty good understanding of what my abilities are. Always trying to push the envelope a little bit, trying to do a little bit more as a songwriter, as a drummer. Maybe even actually less as a drummer now, because I've discovered that the things that I'm good at as a drummer, I don't have to do. There's so many great musicians. That's the thing about being an instrumentalist. I mean, there's so many great players. There's players upon players all over the place, guys with incredible chops. And with drummers, it's always about speed. But drummers have this hang up about speed. We all want to play super fast and throw down a line. And there's some incredible guys who play at very high velocity. And it's a combination of practice and natural ability. For my music, I don't need any of that. I don't. It doesn't fit in what I'm doing. It's convenient that it doesn't, because I can't do it. So I focus on what I can do, and that's provide feel and groove and play songs, because I grew up, learning how to play songs from one of the great masterful song drummers that ever has lived, and that's Ringo Starr. So, you approach it from a different way. I definitely challenged myself as a singer, because I came to it a little bit late. I was not the lead singer in Dada. I was the third voice there. So for a 20-year career, I really didn't sing very much. And then we got 7Horse going, and suddenly I'm the front man. So that was a challenge, and I've really worked hard at that, studied, I decided to really pursue it in a serious way. So anyway, I started off very brash, fully confident, and then imposter syndrome came later when I realized that, I do have limitations, and how am I even doing this? I don't even know how I'm doing what I'm doing. Same thing in my voiceover work. It's like I backed into it. I don't know, what am I doing here with all these actors? This isn't who I am. Somehow, some way, you just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had that experience too. Like, you're super confident when you're young, and you think you know everything, and you think you're the badass and whatever. But then I think it'll hit you, like the realization that you're not, or that you have a lot more work to do. Maybe it comes sooner for others. But yeah, I feel like with wisdom, there's perspective, right? The more you experience life, and the more you grow as an artist, you become more wise, but you also you see more of the horizon of like where you're going and where you've been. So you're like, you have more of that wisdom. And I've been humbled many, many, many times in my career, and I feel like it's super important to always know, your strengths, your weaknesses, where you stand. Every hero falls, gets back up, and has a story to tell, like as you have, as all of everyone who's done anything like major and followed their heart in their career. There's always ups and downs. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can become the person you're meant to become. So yeah, that's inspiring. So thank you for sharing that about, your story. And I also wanted to ask you, what made you decide that you wanted to become a frontman?
Yeah, I didn't really decide it. Joey decided it.
Oh, okay.
7Horse kind of was born out of another sort of, it was born from a crisis. We were unable to make a record with Dada in like 2010. We were trying to get the band into the studio. When we came up, we were at the tail end of the old school music industry. So we were brought up in that structure. By the time we got dropped, that was right in, 98, 99, that was right at the end, basically. Everything started changing in the 2000s, the whole Napster. I mean, that was the beginning of all that, right? So we were kind of lost. We didn't know how to operate as an independent band without a record label. But we knew there was something there, and we also had this sense that let's try to get this band to record new music. And so our producer, Scott Gordon, said, hey, you guys why don't you just come down and use the time? Because we had some time blocked out. And in the course of getting ready to do that, Joey and I wrote some songs. We were writing some songs. We were talking about the blues, and it was him. He was basically like, look, because he had made a couple of solo records, and I think he was just tired of being that guy. He's got a great voice, great singer, powerhouse vocalist, but he thought it would be more interesting if we just turned this thing on his head. And plus, he was going to play lead guitar. He's a bass player, so he's going to have his hands full anyway. He's playing slide in open tunings, and he's writing a lot of riffs and kind of being Keith Richards. And he wanted me to take some of that on and thought it would be an interesting sound. And he was right. It was a good move because it gave us a completely new approach to what we were doing. And it allowed me as a lyricist to write for myself as opposed to just trying to write for him. And but I was skeptical because it's not something that I had done. Now I was just started my voice acting career had been a few years old, so I think some of that experience, I've been doing that for a little bit. Some of that experience of being on a microphone and just using my voice helped me. But it's still a challenge. It's definitely a challenge to be a drummer lead singer. That's a hard thing to do, to hear yourself well enough, to sing in pitch, to breathe correctly while you're playing the drums, moving all your limbs independently, phrasing the vocals independently against the drum groove. That takes a lot of coordination. It takes a while to do that, remembering the lyrics while you're playing the drums.
Well, being a drummer and a vocalist on their own is a challenge, and very technical, like once you're learning the basics,
right.
But to combine that is a whole nother world, you know what I mean? So yeah, major props to you for that, because I can't imagine like when you guys decided, okay, Phil, you're the singer too,
right? And
like navigating those new waters is like.
But I just embraced it.
Yeah.
And I went at it. I wanted to be that guy. I wanted the opportunity to be the guy up front. I enjoy that. I enjoy communicating with the audience. I enjoy the interplay, and I wanted to put that energy out there to people and kind of share with them, where I'm coming from, because as a drummer you're always in the back, so you don't get that experience of being down front. And we did a lot of our shows with the drums right down front. Which presents its own problems, of course, with volume and, and all that kind of stuff, because now you're right down there in the audience's face. But it was really, it's a cool experience to do both. And, and in the studio, of course, you're not doing both at the same time, so I can focus a lot more on singing. And then we go out and try to play some of this stuff live, and I realize the challenge now that faces me in combining these two things together.
Yeah,
it's formidable sometimes.
I bet. Yeah. So I want to pivot a little bit and ask you about your upbringing in Las Vegas, because that was one thing I did not know about you.
Really?
So I
didn't know that?
I know you were from Vegas, but I didn't know like it was an extreme, like you kind of grew up in casino life and around the pit bosses and the dealers. So how do you feel that? Because it seems it's very clear that kind of lifestyle and aesthetic has traveled into 7Horse.
100%.
So tell us a little bit about that and some of your standout moments or experiences, like as a kid in Vegas in the 70s, like during all that craziness, like how did it influence you in your music?
Well, I think it definitely influenced me in my approach to showmanship. You know, Las Vegas was a much different place then than it is now. The Strip and downtown were these little two streets, basically, with the hotels and casinos, and then the rest of the valley, as small as it was, because it's only grown outwards since then, but the rest of the valley was a small town vibe, very kind of conservative place. And then you'd go down to the Strip. My grandfather was a pit boss at the old Stardust Hotel, so he's around the crap tables wearing a suit running the games. My father was a blackjack dealer at various hotels, Caesar's Palace. He worked downtown. So I would go down. You know, we'd sometimes meet my grandfather for lunch at the Palm Room of the Stardust, and I'm like, 8 years old, and you go down there. You're not even supposed to be in the building as a kid, but in those days you had something called juice. That was the slang. If you had juice, that meant you had influence. You could get things comped, given to you for free. So that was very standard operating procedure. Walking into a casino was just like going to the grocery store for me. I was very familiar with it. Seeing him down there, I just remember a ton of cigarette smoke and cocktail waitresses and showgirls walking around. And, it was definitely an adult time. People were dressed. It wasn't like it is now. It wasn't flip-flops and shorts. It was guys in suits and women done up and people gambling and drinking hard, but the aesthetic of show business kind of was shown to me at an early age. I remember, I used to love the Jerry Lewis telethon, and it used to be broadcast from Las Vegas, and my mother and I would watch it every year. We'd stay up all night, and I'd see all the, Wayne Newton and the Osmond brothers would come on, and Helen Reddy and all these classic 70s performers would be on there. And that's kind of how I learned about performance. And, I was there when Elvis was playing at the International Hotel, and, you'd see news reports about him in town. And I went to shows as a kid. I remember being at I think it was the Sahara, and with my dad and my mom, they took me to see Jerry Lewis because, I loved him from the telethon. And of course, his live act was really blue. I mean, it was completely profane, And my dad, who was kind of a wild man in a lot of ways, and certainly was not, he had heard all that language before, but I was a little kid. He got very offended by some of Jerry's, jokes. And he got up in the middle of the show and walked out, and, Jerry Lewis saw him go and said something to him from the stage, and we all got embarrassed. But just the atmosphere, the nightlife, the way that people dressed and the way they carried themselves and the way that performers presented themselves in kind of this old school performance kind of way. You'd never see people performing in jeans and a t-shirt in those days. People were, it was like Cher and Elvis. You had to get dressed. And that's how I perform. I still, go that way. So it was a big influence on me. And I saw a lot of things during that time that most kids wouldn't be exposed to. And it never left me. When I look at that, when I look at the movie Casino, which my dad is actually in, has a cameo in the movie. That's my childhood. I see that's the Vegas that I grew up in. And it had a profound influence on me, just in that appreciation for all of the dark side, that nightlife, which is definitely in the 7Horse aesthetic.
So during this time, did you find yourself, did it maybe lead you to any of these dark habits that maybe you're exposed to, or were you able to resist the temptation, like as you were getting older, or did you move to LA like at around like your late teens, or when did you finally move to LA?
My folks got a divorce, and my mom and I moved. My mom moved me out of there and brought me to the Valley, to Van Nuys, which is basically where we are right now.
Yeah.
Actually, we came to Tarzana first, but I was only 14 then. So I was just getting into that age.
Okay.
Where things could have gotten a little dangerous, you know. But like I said, Vegas was conservative, socially conservative place. Even in the midst of all of that, kind of anything goes. And maybe it still is that way. So I had a very normal, other than the fact that my dad worked nights and the windows were blacked out and you couldn't make any noise around the house because he was asleep during the day because he worked graveyard. So that's the overnight shift. He worked a lot of graveyard shift. And so I grew up having to be very quiet around the house during the day when he would be asleep, and then he would get up at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, or 8 o'clock or whatever, and get ready for work. I was exposed to, I didn't know what it was, but my dad was into, some certain narcotics. Yeah. And I didn't, not even narcotics, just drug. He liked to smoke pot. He was a hardcore, pothead. And we had a Turkish water pipe in the house. I didn't know what that was. One time I remember he was getting ready for work, and I asked him, "What is that smell?" And because he would go on the job, he would be high on the job. And then these were the days when, like, as a bonus, the floor man, the guy who was the boss, would pass out. If you did well on a game, and you'd get a little packet of cocaine. That was kind of like just a tip. Yeah. That was like a little bonus. They'd be passing it out all over the casino. So. What's that smell? And he's like, "Oh, that's nothing. That's Turkish cigarettes." It was not Turkish cigarettes. But in any case, we ended up coming out into the Valley here, in the late 70s, early 80s. I went to high school here. So I became kind of an Angelino at that point, as much as anybody else ever is, everybody here. Although you were born here, right? Yeah. Yeah, you're one of the few, the proud.
Yeah. Do you feel that your mom, that was part of the choice to move out of Las Vegas to raise you in a less intense environment, or the main choice, or part of it? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think she wanted me to have some different opportunities. Yeah. I don't know what would have happened if I would have had a music career had I stayed in Las Vegas the whole time. Maybe I would have ended up, I did end up working there anyway. When I went to Blue Man Group, I ended up back working in Las Vegas. So it could have gone that way anyway. But I think we came out here to have a new, a new start, gain a broader perspective of life. There's a lot of different kinds of people here. We didn't have that in Las Vegas nearly as much, and maybe she wanted me to get away from some of that nightlife temptation. Although there's plenty of things to get in trouble in here in LA.
Yeah.
I think I'm glad that we left. LA provided a ton of opportunity, but it was a culture shock coming from such a insulated environment as Las Vegas. Los Angeles, such a sprawl. And suddenly I was in a school with thousands of kids and, a whole different experience.
Yeah. So you formed the band Dada, you lived the dream, then lost the record deal, and you found yourself back at home in Vegas in the Blue Man Group. So did you feel like when things were going south, like, did you have that yearning to go back home, or is it only because of the gig for Blue Man Group, or what was your mindset at that point?
Yeah, I was really like at wit's end. What am I going to do? I have no skills. I went to high school. I went to junior college for an eighth, not even a quarter. I made it through an eighth, and then I got a road gig, out of junior college. So by the time that we, then I got a publishing deal. So at an early beginning of my career, so I was kind of on a track to go one way as a songwriter, and then I ran into the Dada guys, and that sort of changed my direction and made me a band guy. And I resisted it for a while, but I couldn't help it because they were really good and, you know, we were great together. When that ended and I was kind of busted out, I was really scrambling, you know, for work. I mean, I ended up delivering packages and, you know, wearing a speedy delivery shirt and driving around LA trying to somehow keep it together. And yeah, my marriage was falling apart. It was just a bad time. And then one day I flipped open the LA Weekly and there was a, you know, half-page ad for Blue Man Group Open Call. And I had kind of been aware of it. I'd heard about it. It was, you know, been around for a few years. But it was an open audition was coming up here in Los Angeles and they were, you know, putting a show together in Vegas. And I just kind of, well, I'll give it a shot. You know, that was that quick of you know, you just open the magazine, open the newspaper and there's the ad and you got nothing to lose. So why not? And, that it took me back to Vegas for me was just a bonus. You know, it was great. I was and I was comfortable. A lot of the people that ended up there came from Boston, New York, from Europe. I mean, people came from all over the place to do that show. And for me, I was going home. I was the only, you know, one of the only ones who had that experience. So that made it a little bit easier for me. And I had family there still. So that was cool. And yeah, I felt very fortunate, and I was really excited about working in Las Vegas, you know. And we definitely, this was 2000, 2001, 2002. Vegas was kind of exploding right then. It was having one of its growth spurts, as it always does. You know, it just has these little moments. And for a musician, to be fully employed, working 5 days a week with vacation time, a health plan, and a 401k, you know, was just coming from the record business. Like, wow, what a bright spot. And
right.
It just arrived. You know, how sometimes things just happen for you when you exactly need them. And that's what this was about. And it was just the willingness to take a shot is what got me there, you know. And sometimes that's what you need to do when you get those opportunities. When you really need them, they just arrive. And if you're willing to go, that's when the door opens for you.
Yeah. And when you said you saw that ad in the newspaper, was it an immediately like stars aligned moment? You're like, this is it. Or,
no.
Or were you like resistant a little bit, or were you?
Well, you know, I didn't think of myself. I had to change the way I thought about myself because I was a band guy and I was kind of a minor. I had a little bit of that taste of rock stardom. I mean, we were popular and we had that kind of, this was not going to be about that. This was about being a part of a big ensemble, you know, and, but I remember in the audition for that show, there was a playing portion of the audition, which was completely like nothing I'd ever done before because their rhythms and their approach was completely different than what I had done. Just on a technical level, as a drummer, the bass drum and the hi-hat are in unison most of the time. You know, they have this pulsing eighth note thing under their grooves, and it's with both feet in unison. I never, you know, seems very simple, and it is, but that's just not how I played. How most drummers wouldn't play like that.
Yeah.
You know, you usually boom, boom, tip, and this is doom, 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 doom. It's just bouncing the whole way. So you have to have that feel, and it's very tom oriented. It's very jungly, but they were looking for, you know, like they didn't want Broadway kind of players that had to read. They wanted rock guys. They wanted like, what would happen if Keith Moon played in a Las Vegas show? That's the kind of drummer they were looking for. Animals.
Yeah.
Who could play their vocabulary though. So there was that whole aspect of the thing. And then there was an interview part of the audition. And I think I probably got the gig on the interview because I told them straight up, like, look, I'm looking to be I miss being part of something. I had that in the band, where you've got this goal and you're a team and you're all pushing towards something. I miss that. I want to be part of something bigger than myself. And that's what that was. I mean, you had to subvert your own desires and be part of the team because it was long days in the theater, getting ready to put the show up and stuff that I had never experienced. The theater experience the kind of New York theater culture that they brought out to Las Vegas, the actors and stuff. That's not something that we deal with in rock and roll very much. So it was a completely new, experience for me, but I really enjoyed it. I loved the people, and some fantastic musicians out there from all over the country, and really, really creative weirdos ended up all congregating in Vegas to put this show on, and it became very successful. And we were a bit of we're kind of the toast of the town there for a little bit. When it, as you are when you're the new successful thing, it was really fun to be a part of that group when we'd all go out together. Like 10 of us, 12 of us would go out after the show, stay out till all hours of the morning, getting into some trouble. I mean, that's when things didn't. That's when all of that nightlife caught up with me a little bit there. But it was a fun time, man. It was magic time.
Yeah, I bet. Did the whole like production of it, was that like a learning curve for you? Because I'm sure like with the costume and the makeup and all of that, I'm sure that took like hours to prepare for. And like was that a bit of an adjustment to get used to, or were you like all about it from the get-go, or was? Yeah,
it was both. I mean, it was an adjustment, something I'd never experienced. I mean, I had done musicals in high school. I played in the pit orchestra, here in LA at Birmingham High School in Van Nuys. We did The Wiz and something else I can't remember, but I hadn't been in a theater production since high school. So getting back into that atmosphere, it's completely different than. We infused it with a rock vibe. I mean, all the players in the band were all rock guys. So they had all been in bands. A lot of them, I mean, we had Tim Alexander from Primus in the show at one point.
Oh, wow.
We had Blas Elias from Slaughter was playing drums in the show during the course of the time that I was there. So, it was a place for drummers, really. I mean, it's a drumming show, so it was a great job for a drummer because you're just playing like an animal for hours. Yeah. So, on that level, there was that rock and roll thing was there, but the show, the discipline of a theater production was something that I hadn't been a part of, although I tried to subvert it a little bit.
Do you miss it?
I miss the camaraderie of the people. I got a little bit burnt playing their music night after night after night, especially because I'm an artist. I'm a writer and performer of my own music. I missed that. And I left it to come back to LA to make a record with Mike Gurley from Dada. He had a project called Butterfly Jones. And we wrote some songs together for that and worked on that together. And I basically left the show in order to do that, which could have been a mistake, but it worked out. People thought I was crazy when I left because I was only there for a couple of 2-3 years. And
so I was going to ask you, like, how long were you in Blue Man Group? But so 2 years or 3?
I did 2 years, and then they're so cool there that I got a leave of absence to go do my own artistic project. But then that time period ran out, and I had to decide. And I just, I never thought it was going to be long term for me there. I mean, I have friends that are still doing it that came in 2000s who got married there, had families, bought homes, raised their kids there. I never unpacked when I was there. I stayed. My possessions were in boxes the entire time I was out there, and then I went back on an interim basis and stayed at kind of like one of these corporate housing things and filled in for a while in 2003, and then finally I let it go. I miss the experience of playing with the people. I mean, it's same thing can happen in a band or in a recording session, but it was a little more intense given that there were more people. This sort of instant family. We were all brought in from other parts of the country, thrown into this thing with this one goal in mind. We experienced tragedy early on. One of the musicians died not long after we came out there. So we were really drawn together by all of this highly emotional stuff. We had all kind of come from other situations. Some of us had been in band. There was a guy from Power Man 5000 that was playing drums in the show. Me, we'd had some career success, maybe lost it a little bit. Different personal things went on. And we all ended up, kind of in this highly concentrated, this very emotional high intensity situation. So we bonded together very quickly and really, fell in love with each other and made some really close bonds that still exist to this day. The people that were there will always be connected in that way, that were there at the beginning. It's one of those things. And like I said, it happens on studio projects. It's just like instant family.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about what we do the most, are those relationships with people that are so rewarding.
That's what it all is in general. It's when you're cutting a record, you're collaborating. When you put out your music, it's just people consuming it and it becomes a part of them. So it's all about, people, right? So let's go to let's talk a little about 7Horse and describe it as post-punk dystopian blues. Yeah. So first of all, I love that. And
I can't take credit for that, but somebody put that moniker on. I was like, that's pretty good. I'm going to use it. He's right.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you had the big hit with Meth Lab Zozo Sticker.
That's right.
And which was featured in Wolf of Wall Street, directed by Martin Scorsese. How did that connection come to be? Did you go through there's those third party companies that pitch your stuff, or did you know someone directly with the production? And how did that come to be?
It completely fell in our lap. It was complete, just like out of the blue. I mean,
Wow.
We literally had no connections to anybody. We put the record out. I hired a couple of radio promotion guys to work on it. Back in the day, even in 2011, you could try to make some headway at radio as an independent artist with limited budget. We put our first single out, was a song called Low Fuel Drug Run, and that did okay. Got into the 30s on the adult alternative chart. That's where we went AAA. We tried to follow it up with Meth Lab Zozo Sticker. Nobody would play it on the radio, but we did have a champion over at Sirius XM, a guy named Mike Maroney, had a show on a channel there called The Loft, which isn't even on anymore. And he played the shit out of Meth Lab Zozo Sticker. He loved it. One day, we had gone out on the road and played shows as a two-piece. And Joey and I went back to ground zero, coming from tour buses and flying around, having toured with Sting and done a lot of the Greek theater and all this stuff. We climbed into a van with the two of us in our gear and started playing barbecue joints. And we went back to the beginning. And, huffing gear and
barbecue joints.
We literally played a barbecue joint in New Mexico. Yeah.
That's perfect. For the brand of the music though. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So we were out doing that. And then in 2012, we had a Dada reunion. Dada was out on the road. And we had 7Horse as the opening act. So I've put this thing together from the beginning. This thing we're doing at the Roxy is nothing new. We've done Dada 7Horse before. In those days, it was the two-piece 7Horse opening and Dada, coming next. A lot of people didn't even know it was us, because we looked a little different.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were out on the road and in the middle of making our second record. Actually, I've jumped ahead a little bit, because what happened was an email arrived from who knows where. Joey got an email, and I heard from him with it. He forwarded it to me with "Is this real?" And it was an email from an attorney claiming to represent the interests of Martin Scorsese. We'd like to clear Meth Lab Zozo Sticker for use in his new film. I did quick research, led me to the fact that he was indeed making a movie, so it was legit. And then came the process of trying to figure out how to negotiate a sync license. I knew nothing about sync licensing in those days. And so I started putting feelers out around town, trying to, gain some intelligence about how to deal with this situation. And I got suggestions that were so wide financially, like huge spreads of what to ask for. And also with the warning that if you come in too high, they're going to just blow you off. So don't do that. You're only going to get one shot at this, Little did they know we would have given it to them for free, probably, had they, just asked for it, because we didn't know what it was worth. So after getting all this information from people and trying to figure it out, I kind of put a number on it and answered them back, and they went for it. You know, and they basically wanted to clear like no, it might have been at the time, you know, the way directors work, he's in the middle of cutting the movie. And at the point where they asked us for it, the song was in for like 15 minutes. You know, we want to clear 13 minutes of Meth Lab Joseph. We were like, what? You know, we couldn't believe that. And then they basically told us, okay. And we arrived at an agreement, and they said, all right, here's how it's going to go down. He's editing the movie. If you make the final cut, you'll hear from us. If you don't, you probably won't. And, you know, we'll try to get back to you over the summer. This was in April or May. And so we had to wait it out. And every once in a while we'd check in. How's it going? And she'd be like, you're still in, you know? And then finally we were out on the road with Dada. And on a couple of nights off from Dada, Joey and I went to Milwaukee to record. So we were in Chicago. We went to a studio we had access to in Milwaukee. We cut a couple of tracks there and wrapped our second 7Horse record there. And afterwards, we went out and had celebrated. And I got hammered in Milwaukee, drinking those old fashions they have out there. And and the next morning we're flying out. And I'm so hungover, I'll never forget it. I mean, really, really bad. And I'm sitting there drinking a Coke, trying to get ready for this flight. And he gets a text from his brother saying, I just saw the trailer for Wolf of Wall Street. You guys sound great in it. And that's how we found out we were.
Wow.
And we didn't even know they were using us in the trailer at that point, because that's a separate deal, the trailer and then the film itself. That's how we found out. Like they ended up getting in touch with us later, but we found out about it through his brother. And that will cure a hangover.
I bet.
The lesson there is
wake you the fuck up.
Yeah. You get a shot of adrenaline and you're good.
Wow.
So, I mean, you know, we had, people are always asking about how you do something like that. And it's like, I don't know. Just happened.
Sync licensing is still like, you know, like when you don't really, when there's a lot to be learned and the subject is very like all over the place and not so.
It's always in this,
you'll see
in the darkness.
Well, yeah, there's, you know, so many books on it, so many YouTube videos on how to do this or whatever. So sync licensing is like still, it's not a define this is how you do it thing. Like it's so up to chance. And yeah, there's things put in place that you can hire certain companies to pitch your stuff for X amount and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, it does seem kind of like a mystery, right? So it's like, well, how do we get our song in a major motion picture? Well, it's like, I don't know. Right?
I don't know. That's I can't tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could. I wish it was like so easy as like, well, do this, this, and this, and it'll happen. It's like, it's not like that. Put your music out. Make sure your music is, because, you know, we never were able to really get to the bottom of how this happened.
I was just going to ask you, like, did Martin hear it and want it, or did someone on his team hear it, or like
we never found out. You know, how it happened, we don't know, but a lot of times I think these things will come about because, you know, you've got the director could have heard it, Scorsese himself, it's possible. The music supervisor, a guy named Randall Poster, maybe he heard it and thought it would be perfect. Robbie Robertson was a consultant on the film for the music. He may have heard it, but quite likely there's a guy sitting at an editing bay doing cuts for Scorsese, and they need something. They need music as a temp track, and the editor sometimes finds something and drops it in. And then the director looks at it and goes, yeah, I like that. And then they keep looking to change it, but he keeps coming back to it and saying, it still works. And finally it's like, well, let's just use that. You know, that may be how it had happened. So did the fact that it was getting play on satellite radio help us? Probably did. You know, I mean, I think nowadays you release a song, it's everywhere. You know, even back in 2011, as far as streaming goes, you know, it wasn't necessarily going to be on every platform that there was. I mean, I think I put it up through TuneCore, so I guess it was around everywhere. But it was a mystery. We tried to find out, you know, we could never get to the bottom of it. I wish I knew, because people ask me that all the time, how it happened. I don't know.
See, like, that's the thing, like with this line of work, like, you struggle for so long and you finally get like a big break, then you struggle again, and then something just from your persistence and your dedication to the, you know, the long haul, like the long game, by having that mindset, like every once in a while, if you put in the work, like something magical like that might just drop in your lap. So you have to, it's a perfect example of that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You know, I mean, Joey has this thing that he likes to quote all the time. There are no losers in the music business. There's just winners and quitters. And he's right to an extent. It's like if you keep on, you have to keep going. You have to stay in the game. And I mean, for some people, look, they're superstars and they blow up and they just are, you know, they're whoever, you know, name your superstar. But for a vast majority of us, it's about longevity and being around when you intersect the next opportunity. But you have to be going down that road. And there's long stretches where it's a barren wasteland and there's nothing happening. And you've got to persevere through those times. It's the hardest thing to experience and then to learn how to deal with, you know. And I've learned how to deal with it in a couple of different areas of show business, you know, the music business and the voice acting game is the same. You know, you can get very hot and be booking all the time. And then just like that, you can be as cold as ice, you know, and you have to, and you know, you hear no a lot more than you hear yes. And how do you react to the word no? You know, do you make it about you to the extent that it's all about your identity? And when you hear the word no, you go, I'm full of shit. I can't do this. Or do you go, well, you know,
next,
they're looking for an orange. I'm an apple.
Yeah.
What can I do about that?
Yeah.
You kind of have to take that attitude if you're going to last, you know, if you're going to make it to the next opportunity. And it's taken me a long time but I think I have a pretty good handle on how to deal with that now as I'm getting into this phase of my life. I mean, I've been rejected so many times that it really doesn't faze me much anymore. You know, I kind of like it because that means I'm just going to move on to the next one.
Yeah, it's part of the game, and it can be influencing. It's like, okay, well, I'm just going to push harder at the next thing. Right. So,
and you know, you try to learn from those things too. It's like, well, why didn't it work out? Well, I mean, you know, I approach it that way in voiceover a lot. I hear the thing, you know, I audition for a lot of commercials. I hear them on television, and I go, oh, gee, that's not, you know, I get it. I get why they hired that guy because that's not what I would have done. In music, you know, look, you're following your muse. You're all you can create is things that you feel that resonate with you, and hopefully other people agree with you. You can't engineer that, though. I mean, I guess you can. Some people try to make records that are, you know, designed to reach mass audience appeal. They do, obviously. That's never been my road. You know, I've always been my music has always been more for a niche audience, both Dada and 7Horse. I mean, Dada had a moment where we kind of had a hit on the radio, but and Meth Lab Zoso Sticker kind of resonated on a wider audience. So I've had a couple of moments where I've kind of struck a chord with more people, but not like when you're really talking about getting big, you know,
right.
That's a whole different thing.
Yep.
But it's worked out.
Yeah, I like what you said about it's a barren wasteland, and it's like it's such a great way of describing it, because even if you've been successful for 10 years and you had a great run, you did a bunch of touring, had a bunch of singles, in everyone's career at some point it just goes dry, like you said, and it's how do you deal with that? Like, how do you mentally just calm yourself down and know, okay, I'm not a piece of shit. I don't suck. This is just a downtime. This is just one of those downtimes, and I need to get through it however I can and not take it personally, because
it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, look, we're only human beings here. We I can try to tell you that I have this impenetrable shield and, you know, this self-confidence that's untouchable, but that would be exaggeration. I mean, we all have those moments when we are just kind of beaten down and nothing is going right, and we can't catch a break. And but the longer you do it, and the longer you stick around, and you know, like for myself, I didn't spend a lot of time. I've always been a band guy. You know, I'm not a guy who does a lot of recording sessions for other people. I don't have a lot of connections into like getting called for tours and doing different things. It's like it's not been the direction of my career, which I wish I would have done it a little differently now in hindsight. I was shy. I was insecure about who I was as a young person. And so that kind of kept me a little too insulated. This business, you know, you do need to know people because those are possible connections for gigs and whatnot. And I never put enough energy into that. And, you know, maybe people think that's because I'm too aloof and I think I'm better than everybody else, but really it was because I'm insecure and I didn't have enough confidence when I was younger to really be out there. And I was very happy to be in the insular world of a band or a group or a show where you've got your family around you. You know, I've always felt more comfortable in those situations. A couple of years ago, I did get a call and went out on the road and played with Cherie Currie of the Runaways on a tour. And I got into a situation on that tour in a band with like some heavyweight hired gun guys, you know, that had played with some bigger name artists and who do this for a living. And even in then, this was only a few years ago, 2019, I felt very insecure when I showed up on that gig because I was not one of those guys on that level. I was a guy who'd done some cool things, but more for myself on my own projects than working for whoever, you know. And it took a while before I was comfortable in that scenario. I mean, I did a good job there and it was successful, but it can be nerve-wracking when you are out of your comfort zone. But in order to move forward, you know, that's kind of a prerequisite that you got to get out of your comfort zone.
Totally. That's a great point because you don't really grow if you stay in your comfort zone. You don't really expand, you know, your personality, your career. Like if you just kind of stay doing the one thing, I think there's a lot of value in trying something new, like pushing yourself to do something that maybe you are a little afraid of. And, you know, it turns you into like a greater version of yourself. And I think what you did with Blue Man Group, you know, like that was one of them for you, you know, like for sure. Expanding and, you know, working with a larger group of people and then like taking that experience into your future work with 7Horse and the show and Vegas. So yeah, man. So you have a show coming up.
That's right. The Roxy, August 19th, hot summer night, we call it.
Yeah.
Hot summer night at the Roxy, Saturday, August 19th, 7Horse, Mike Dawson and the Smokin' Kills is the opener, and a featured reunion set from Dada. So it should be an exciting evening.
Hell yeah. So for anyone who wants to check out your music who hasn't heard it, where can everyone go to find it?
Well, you can always go to 7horsemusic.com. That's our website. Of course, our music is on every streaming service that there is, YouTube, you know, you can see our videos. We're everywhere from TikTok to Twitter and everywhere in between, as you must be. I would, you know, I hope people will listen to the music first before they look at all the rest of the stuff. Check out the music wherever you listen to your music, and come see the band live and get a dose of rock and roll meets showbiz and you know, a lot of good energy in the room.
You're going to be wearing another one of your killer sparkling suits?
I'd say that's likely, that I'll have something together for the show.
Hell yeah. Well, yeah. Phil, thank you so much for coming by and sharing all that. I know everyone's going to really enjoy hearing about your career and your life, and I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about you today. So appreciate it, man.
Alex, man, let me just say this too. I'm going to embarrass you.
Do it.
I've known you since you were a kid. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
That you have been able to do what you always wanted to do. You have that thing that I've got, that we talk about, that you're a survivor. You are a guy who I know has ridden the roller coaster a bit.
Oh yeah.
And you're still here doing it in this really cool space. And, props to you, man. You just keep on doing your thing.
Thank you, Phil. It means a lot. It means a lot coming from you. Appreciate that. Cool, man. Well, everyone go check out 7Horse, get tickets to the show, and thanks for listening. Cheers.